You are listening to Podcasting 101 with RSS.com, getting you ready to launch and grow your podcast.
Hey everyone, Ashley here with RSS.com. In today's episode, we're chatting with Lloyd George all about how to use TikTok to promote your podcast. Enjoy the show. Cool. All right, well, Lloyd, welcome to the show. I'm so excited you could be here with us today. Can you do us a favor and tell us what it is you do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ashley. Huge fan of the show. So my name is Lloyd, and I create content for people, helping them start their first podcast.
Well, that is a short and sweet description. I think that might be the shortest description we've heard. That's kind of awesome. Now, when did podcasting come into what it is you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started listening and consuming podcasts in 2015. I was working at a dead-end job, and I'd listen to podcasts to make the time go by. 2018 is when I decided, you know what, like I could probably start my own podcast. Like I could transition from being like a consumer to like a creator. And so 2018 is when I decided to start my first podcast. And 2021 was when I decided that, you know what, podcasting has changed my life in so many ways, and I want as many people as possible to experience this. And so I started being an advocate for the podcast community and encouraging as many people as possible to start their podcast.
Wow. So are you still stuck in that dead-end job, or are you just doing podcasting full-time?
I am a freelancer now, so I'd say about 50% of my time is like podcasting content, working with brands, and then the other 50% is just sort of like part-time project management.
That's fantastic. Now, one of the things that actually kind of drew you into my radar is I was working on a post for Medium, basically talking about different ways to promote a podcast. And you were one of the very few people that actually recommended TikTok. So I'm very curious as to when you started using TikTok to promote podcasts.
Yeah, I'm probably one of the few people that is very spoiled because I started using TikTok in December of 2021. And my first post got like 1,200 views. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like a post about nothing. And 1,200 people saw it. That's like amazing. I did not know that that was not normal. That was just, that post has happened to do exceptionally well. On average, a post will get between like 200 and 300 views. But that was just the spark I needed to know, like, oh my gosh, this is possible. Literally about 3 or 4 months later, I had a post go viral and do over 100,000 views. And so it's just been a great platform and a great way for people to discover me. Are you on TikTok as well?
I dabble.
Okay. Yeah.
Mostly right now, I just like a lot of videos, but I mean, for the RSS, for our platform, we actually do have a TikTok account, and we have loaded a couple of videos. But in terms of my personal stuff, I'm still a lurker.
Yeah, that's phase one.
Yeah. So now, whenever you started using TikTok, did you intend to use it for podcasting, or you just started using it?
No, I just started using it. And you know what? I hope in the future that those two sort of merge, right? I think as creators and podcasters, we sort of look at it like, hey, this is my podcast TikTok, and this is my personal TikTok. This is my podcast Instagram, my personal Instagram. And I think in the future, those will probably just become one thing, right? This is my page, and I post about both things. And so with TikTok specifically, I just started creating content specifically for me with some of the things that I was interested in. And whenever I was featured on other people's podcasts, or whenever I did do my own podcast, I'd also share it on my platform. And so people sort of got to see different sides of me. And I think in some ways it was almost like unveiling the curtain to certain users because they may only know me for tech content. And then to see this guy talking about podcast content and microphones was also intriguing, just to see somebody in a different light. And so for me, I just started with my personal account. And what I love about TikTok is it's very easy just to start small, right? Like you don't have to plan. You don't need a great camera. You don't need a mic. You can just pull out your phone, make a video in 10 seconds and publish it. And, that's acceptable.
Okay, so you said you don't really have a plan. So how do you decide what's going to go on the platform?
I personally, I wake up every day, and my goal every single day is just, how can I publish the best possible video today? That is the only thing I think about for that specific day. And the best video to me isn't necessarily the most high quality video. Sometimes it's just, my best performing video ever is a video where I was in the car, I was kind of sick, and I was just like, you know what, like, I don't feel like doing this today. I'm just going to pull out my phone and just do it to say I did it. And that video ended up going viral. And so I think that level of authenticity is what people are searching for, which which makes this whole idea of not having a plan, just pulling out your phone, saying whatever is on your mind at that specific time. I think that's why posts like that do really well. And just to make a broader point, I think when you look at, there's a new social media platform called Be Real. And the idea here is just that at a random point in the day, you'll get a notification saying, hey, it's time for you to be real. And at that specific moment, you have 2 minutes to pull out your phone and take a picture of whatever is happening around you. And, in I think maybe September and October, it was the most downloaded app in the Apple App Store. And so I think people want that level of authenticity. They don't want something that seems over engineered. They want to know, don't give it to me filtered, just give me the raw and authentic version of you.
It's interesting you say that because I follow Rachel Peterson. She's pretty big on TikTok, and she said that I think it was her. She said that some of the videos that she's done where she puts on a full beat of makeup and she's got the whole background and the whole plan, the whole script, all the things will get no views, and then she'll just take out her phone and just say something off the cuff, and it gets 1 million views.
It's so bizarre, isn't it?
And it's not fair. So you mean we can't be these scripted people anymore?
Right. Exactly. Do you feel like people are the same way with their podcast, that we feel like we have to dress ourselves up because we're podcasting now?
Honestly, I do, because there's a joke that someone was telling me recently that they have to get out of podcaster voice because if they they were putting their son to bed one night and he's like, I couldn't get out of podcaster voice. And my son looked at me and was like, could you quit reading the book like that, Dad? And I was just like, that's hysterical because you don't think of these things.
That's a great analogy. I love that. That's so true.
And I bet we do it all the time and don't even realize it, because I know I do. I definitely do. I'll be on the phone and my voice goes up a couple octaves, and I start projecting, and my husband will just be like, can you just talk like a normal person, please? I don't even know what that is anymore.
Right, exactly. I live in the digital world. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I agree. And I that's something I'm hoping to get better at in 2023. This idea that I think the more authentic you are, I think the more you'll find sort of your true fans, the true people that actually love what you do and what you put out.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my way into that myself. I was actually just talking to Jenny Sennison. We were discussing podcasting and Pinterest, and she was basically saying, something similar to what you just said about how instead of having 2 different Pinterest accounts, you should have one that has the many facets of your brand, because let's face it, each one of us, we are our own brand at this point. And so if we're trying to promote multiple things, we might as well just have one place we do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And it's so funny that you say that, because I think that I agree and I believe that methodology, but I feel like TikTok makes it very hard to do that. So I have 3 separate TikToks that all perform very well, but that's also because they're all for very specific things. And I don't know that the rest of the world operates that way, that I think people want just one person that embodies everything. So it's something I'm trying to maneuver and navigate as well.
Okay, well, since you said that, I gotta bring it back to what we're talking about here today. So is one of the TikToks specifically for your podcast?
It's not. One of the TikToks is specifically for podcasting, which is very niche in itself. And so all of the content that goes on that page is specific to podcasting. One day it may just be like, hey, here's how I manage my schedule so that I can podcast, which is not necessarily, on the surface podcast related, but in theory, it's the same sort of concept. And another one of the TikToks is just for project management, where I talk about ways I got into sort of my day job and how I was able to build a career without a college degree, which is an entirely different audience.
Yeah, that is it. That really is.
Yeah,
totally different hashtags and everything. Well,
right,
so
right.
when you're working with people or with what you've seen in the industry of podcasting, what do you see is happening with TikTok? What makes it a good way to promote a podcast?
That's such a great question. And I think part of the reason we are all on social media is because we all want to be discovered by new people. At the core foundation, that is what we want. And the platforms that can do that really well tend to excel, and the platforms that are still trying to figure it out, like Instagram, tend to have a harder time. And so with TikTok, I think the algorithm is so good that it is able to take content, put it out to people that don't know you in hopes that they will like your content, follow you, and build a deeper relationship with you. And so I don't know that I've seen any other platform that's able to do that as well as TikTok. Some of the clips I post on, I made a joke where I made this meme sort of saying like, hey, my wife was laughing at me because as a podcaster, I emailed Barack Obama asking him to be on my podcast. And I just happened to put that video out and it just performed so well. And so just to see like the reach that TikTok was able to give me and the amount of people that didn't know me that were now able to be exposed to my content, that's such a tremendous benefit. And because we don't have any search or discoverability within the podcast sector, I think we're leaning on platforms like TikTok or YouTube to show our content to new people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how do you think that in terms of like downloads, because we're all after downloads, right?
Yeah.
How do you think it's helping people to, once they are discovered, get more downloads for their podcast?
All right. So before I answer that question, I just want to take a step back and say a very controversial statement. I
Uh-oh.
think that, in the future, I don't know that downloads will be our be all. And right now I think they are, right? Like RSS downloads. I think next year there's a chance that we may be saying like, hey, what are your RSS downloads? What are your YouTube numbers? And what are your TikTok numbers? That's how I want to determine if I want to sponsor your podcast versus right now where I feel like it's just RSS downloads. And so that is sort of like the broken link right now. If a post goes viral on TikTok, a podcast clip, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that virality will transfer into podcast downloads. And we're trying to make that a little more seamless and we've gotten a lot better. But right now that connection is a bit weak. There still is a correlation, like if something goes viral on TikTok, I can normally see my podcast numbers are a bit higher, but it's certainly not 1-to-1.
Wow, that's a lot to digest.
It was a loaded question.
Yeah, it was, but it's kind of good because I mean, if you're seeing these things happen in the industry already, then there's a chance that it could be going that way. So I think there's something to be said about, you can't just rely, and that's another thing I was talking about with Jenny earlier, is you can't just rely on one platform. I mean, yes, you want your
Yeah.
podcast to perform well and things like that, but if you're trying to get a message out there, you can't rely on anything as just your singular, this is how I'm going to get my comment out there for the world to hear.
Yeah, and Ashley, I want to ask you what you think about this. Do you feel like video will have a place in RSS? Like, do you feel like in the same way that someone can watch a YouTube video and get one view, that will somehow figure out a way to count those towards like RSS numbers, even if it's like 2-to-1 or something?
I can't speak for the company on that, but I personally, I think it might come that way. I don't know. I know that a lot more podcast hosting companies, they're starting to implement video into their like their overall plan. I know that YouTube just released an awesome guide to how to podcast on YouTube and things like that. So it's very clear that video is becoming the thing. Like if content is king, then clearly video content is kind of like the thing that's going to take over the throne, if you will. So
Yeah.
I think that there's something to be said about if you're trying to make success in the world of podcasting, you have to be a multifaceted content creator. You can't just rely on sitting behind the microphone anymore, which is terrible and awesome all at the same time, because you do have your people that are in their basements just recording into a microphone and they don't want to be on camera. But I think that what we're going to start to see is that the people who are willing to do multiple types of content are going to be the ones that are going to shine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I think to that point, I think all of us as podcasters, we are just trying to build communities of people. And that's where I think TikTok and some of those platforms could be helpful. I don't know that if a podcast clip goes viral on TikTok, I don't know that is going to benefit my podcast because 1 million people are going to go now view my podcast. I think the way in which TikTok will help my podcast is there's these people that are being exposed to my short form content that are starting to love me. And they're starting to ask themselves, how can I get more of Lloyd, or how can I watch something of Lloyd's that's more than 60 seconds? And so having that community transition from TikTok or Instagram to the podcast where they can now get an hour guaranteed every single week, I think is the way in which those two entities will work together.
Okay, so let's pull that back for just a second. So if we're talking about the idea of needing to promote yourself on more than one platform, and we've already mentioned the fact that, you can't exactly get TikTok numbers to translate to direct downloads. Would you say that the better way to go about getting, let's say, sponsorships for a podcast is to create like a new list of deliverables other than just a podcast mention?
Abs 100%. Such a great point. And just, I will say also, just a side note, just to backtrack, I do think that there is a way to get that correlation between TikTok and your podcast. I just think it requires a lot more intentionality than what people think. And so I've been doing these videos where I say, hey, I just interviewed a creator that has, they made $1 million from their YouTube page. Here's how they said they did it. And so the person starts explaining how they said they did it. And then it gets to a cliffhanger, and that's where the video ends. And so the only way you get the rest of that answer is to actually go to the podcast. And so I just don't think a lot of TikTokers are thinking about that level of intentionality when it comes to their podcast clips. That said, I will say, I think that I am starting to see more creators say, hey, instead of you paying me $200 for me to feature you on my podcast, how about you pay me $1,000 and I'll give you a TikTok shout out. I'll include you in my email and I will write a review for you or something, or a YouTube video. And so bundling, I do think that is going to be a great way for like creators to collaborate with brands, just because a lot of the creators I'm seeing start to do this have smaller audiences. So it's in their best interest to do so.
Well, yeah, and anybody who's listening to this, if they hear the 1,000 versus the 200, they're going to want the 1,000 every day.
Exactly. And when you think about it, a lot of these brands, just to get some sort of like an actual action from a listener, they're going to have to see the ad multiple times.
That's true. Because what is it they say? You got to be seen 7 times before someone
Exactly.
even considers working with you.
Exactly. That's a great point.
Okay, so let's say I'm a brand new podcaster. I haven't even launched my podcast. I'm thinking about it. I'm just getting ready. So I come to you, I tell you, okay, Lloyd, I really want to start my podcast and I want to promote it on TikTok. What do I do first?
The first thing I'd say is it absolutely needs to be a video podcast if you want to promote it on social, obviously. And then if you think about creating your podcast as a video first podcast, I think that's going to give you an advantage. And so some of the small ways that may translate is whenever you're recording your podcast, you'll do everything the exact same, but you'll want to make sure that you put your phone right next to you and record yourself via video as you are recording your podcast. And so finding small ways like that to continue to include video in your podcast will be an easy way for you to promote your podcast on TikTok. That said, once you have your podcast recorded and you have that video file, you'll want to chop it up into small clips, and you'll want the clips to essentially either you want them to provide context and solve problems. In other words, it's like answering a question, or you don't want them to have any context, but you want them to be entertaining, captivating, or something controversial that captures people's attention. On TikTok, you have about 3 seconds for someone to decide whether they're going to watch your video or not. And so if they do watch it, it's going to be because it helps them, like it actually has information they need, or it's entertaining.
Okay, you said 3 seconds. So here's what I need to know. Do you believe the old adage that you only get the one chance to make a first impression, or can you bomb terribly and then come back and try again?
I do not believe that. I believe you can bomb terribly. And that's like the beautiful thing about TikTok. You can, and I saw an interesting article that was suggesting that what if every single day you just posted the same video? Because that video, about 80% of the people that see it are going to be net new. Those are people that have never seen your content before. So it actually makes more sense to keep reposting it until it does well, until TikTok finds the appropriate algorithm and sends it in that direction. And so that said, I look at every day as sort of like a new opportunity. And so I wake up every day, I say, you know what, today I'm going to put out one video. And if it fails, that's totally okay, because tomorrow is a completely different audience, and same with the next day. And so the more at bats you have, the more you increase your chances of success. When I started, I was actually doing like 7 videos a day, just because I knew that was like 7 tries per day.
Wow. So
yeah,
it feels like a lot of pressure, though.
I think it's less pressure.
Really?
Because if you're doing one video, you have the stakes of that video needing to be really good are a lot higher for you than they are for me.
Okay, so what do you say to the person who's like, yeah, but I'm scared to go on camera?
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a friend named Austin Hankowitz, who's an amazing creator. I'd say about, he's a finance creator, and I think he has like 500,000 followers on TikTok. He does this full time, but I'd say about maybe 80% of his videos are not on camera and the other 20% are. And so he does this weird thing where he has his phone pointed on a piece of paper and he's like writing and talking, but you never see his face. And they're so engaging, so interesting. And so I encourage people, don't let that hold you back. It's more important that you just start, because even if you don't show your face, let's just say for the first 6 months, that's still 6 months of you getting better as a creator. That's still 6 months of you trying to create an audience and a community. There's just so many benefits to starting sooner rather than later.
Okay, because I saw your TikTok today, I already know what you're going to say. But what do you say to the people who are like, but everybody's going to judge me for what I post?
Right. That's such a great misunderstanding. And I was actually victim to that assumption as well. This idea that, I'm not starting because I think people are going to look at me weird that I'm starting a podcast. And now that I've started, I can't, that couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is most of the people that I thought cared didn't care. And even as I look back at my podcast numbers, there weren't enough people listening that, anyone could actually care. It was literally my mom, my wife, my brother, my sister. Great. And so I think what I now know is the earlier you start, the longer of an opportunity you have to get better. And so don't put that much pressure on yourself now. Just get started. And one thing you can do that I did as well is I created content with no intention of ever putting it out, just literally just for myself to get comfortable talking on camera, hearing my voice. Same with like my podcast. I'd record episodes and just leave them on my computer. It wasn't until my wife was like, "Oh, this is pretty good. You should like put this out." And that gave me the confidence I needed to release my first episode.
That's an interesting idea. I never thought of well, actually, that's not completely true. I have thought of doing that just to kind of get comfortable with the medium of doing things. So how much of the content that you never thought would see the light of day is now online?
That's a great question. Probably 90% of it, but I do create a lot of content. Like, last winter, I was doing probably like 20 videos every week. So like on a Saturday, I just batch create 20 videos. And so if maybe like I record 20, but maybe only like 12 get out, I'm okay with that. Like I still get to improve and get better. And as I look back at some of my older content, I can't believe I released that and put that out. And that I think is just reflective of the fact that if you start sooner than later, you have a bigger opportunity to improve.
Okay, I got to ask another
And
question about
I just
that.
have to say one last thing.
Okay.
I think people underestimate how much creating content online could actually change their life. And I think about someone like myself that, like I don't have like a college degree. I don't have a lot of like experience professionally, but I've gotten job offers from like people listening to my podcast and saying like, "Oh, I heard you're passionate about this. I love the way that you thought about that. If you're interested, we have an opportunity for you." I've had people fly me to different cities to create content, and I'm not like a super big creator, right? But that's just like, that's the content ecosystem. You don't know who's listening. There's a guy named Paul C. Brunson, and he talks about how he started a podcast years ago, and he'd get like 10 YouTube videos or 10 views on YouTube or something. And for years, he didn't get any views. Most of those views are his mom. But one of the people that was watching that YouTube was Oprah, and she ended up hiring him to do a show, right? And so you just don't know what could happen, where it could lead. And so that's just like the beauty of it.
Well, because of the fact that you're talking about you don't know where it could lead, you don't know who's watching, do you ever delete your content?
I have like deleted 2 videos in my lifetime, but I absolutely recommend that people don't delete their content. I'll delete it if I feel like it's not legible, like it's hard to understand or you can't like read it or hear it. But outside of that, I think this evolution of our social profiles, it's great and it's helpful for a lot of people. And the beauty of social media is it compounds. And so there's a lot of content I've posted, like that I have posted now, that within the first month of me posting it performed terribly. But every month, just like, 300 more people watch it, 300 more people watch it. And that over a year, it adds up.
Now, with TikTok, do you feel like you have to add certain hashtags to it, or is it just, you post stuff and people see it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think when I normally hear people talk about TikTok, I think there's a lot of people that talk about it conceptually. I just want to give some like practical tips and some practical things you can do that will help your videos. The first is like hashtags. And, I think this varies. I don't have like the perfect answer. What I have seen work for me is I normally use about 6 hashtags. 2 of them will sort of be like larger and sort of broad over like the overall industry. So I may use like podcasting, podcaster. And then the next 2 will be specific to like that topic on that episode. So it may be, how to become a podcaster, or how to start your podcast using Anchor, or how to check how to use rss.com. So it's specific to that episode. And then the last two will be ultra niched. So I may say one of them is always hashtag Lloyd not G, so that if someone just wanted to click a hashtag and see all of my videos I've ever created or been tagged in, they can do that. And so I just sort of use this methodology that starts very high level and zooms in. The other thing you can do practically is if you can pick a viral song in your TikTok and then lower the volume, but you want to make sure the song you're picking, TikTok also uses what they call domain authority. And so if you're picking a hashtag with 1 million users, but you only have 1,000 followers, you don't have enough domain authority to rank within that hashtag. So you'll want to pick a smaller hashtag that you can essentially like own. And as you get bigger, you'll start to pick larger hashtags.
Man, the one that you said that just kind of is emblazoned in my brain right now is that you use your own name as a hashtag. What gave you
Yeah.
that idea? What gave you the idea to do that?
I took a TikTok course, and one of the ladies in there said that, and I just loved that. That's such a great idea. And so now it's like you can go back, click, and the beautiful thing is hashtags accumulate views. Just so, obviously that's how you know how many people have seen it. So I can now go to my hashtag and hashtag Lloyd not G, and you can see like, oh, I've accumulated 50 million views or whatever it may be.
My mind's blown right now. I just it's something I never would have thought of, and it's genius.
Yeah, great way to brand yourself.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'm like writing down notes left and right. So now with your titles though, like do you have to come up with like something special, or is it just kind of like the hashtags? You just do it based on what's in the video?
Yeah, this is where it gets very, very nuanced and complex. And I think this is sort of like where like we have the biggest opportunity to really set ourselves apart. I was just on a call yesterday and I was asking the guy like, "Oh, how'd you like hear about me? Like, how'd you find me?" And he was like, "Hey, I searched up podcasting and TikTok and you were the first video that came up." And so TikTok is becoming more of a SEO or a search engine. And really for most of Gen Z and even like a large percentage of millennials, they're using TikTok as their primary search engine. And so you want to make sure everything that you're putting in your TikTok bio is easily searchable. And so that's how I think of it. I do have sort of like my high level keywords that I want to rank for and I want people to find me. And so I try and weave it into every single post. I do not have a post that is not like SEO optimized.
Well, speaking of SEO, do you repurpose those TikTok videos anywhere else?
I do, but my personal experience is that does not work that well. I do it just because I have nothing to lose doing it. And so, for instance, I may post something on TikTok that's going to average, let's just say, 10 new followers each time I post a video on TikTok. That same video will maybe average 1 new follower per video on Instagram. And so it's technically not that helpful, but I have nothing to lose doing it. And I think the reason that is the types of videos that I think that do well on Instagram are very different than the types of videos that do well on TikTok. And TikTok, you kind of know, hey, you need a hook, you need a great story, and the algorithm is really good. So even if you have a 2-minute video, it can still perform well on TikTok. On Instagram, a lot of the content I see is like less than 10 seconds, like a lot of the content that performs really well. And so that's sort of like how I'm thinking about it. All these platforms, including YouTube Shorts, all kind of need something different in order to really excel on the platform. And so I'm still wrapping my mind around how can I like repurpose all of this content.
Well, and yeah, and the other problem you deal with if you try to repurpose to YouTube Shorts is, unlike TikTok, you get copyright strikes.
Exactly. And that's like a whole, that's, something I feel like we're not talking about enough in podcasting. Like what happens if you create a podcast with a clip and use a sound in it. And so now that podcast is sort of restricted with where you can put it, kind of to your point, like you can't put it on YouTube, right? You can't even run an ad against it, right? Back to like our conversation about Facebook ads. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, like, whenever you do get these copyright issues, you sometimes can't even keep it on the podcast platform of choice because they know that they can get dinged and they don't want to have to deal with the legal troubles. So Gordon Firemark, who's the podcast lawyer, he talks a lot about this. And so we'll leave some stuff in the show notes about different music things that you need to be aware of, because there's a common myth that, oh, I can use 7 seconds. No, you can't.
Right, exactly.
No, you can't. Not without permission.
There's so many things that I think are very much, and I think part of it is it's intentionally very great, but I think there are a lot of misconceptions, like what we can and can't do.
Well, and plus, I mean, the other thing is, all this media stuff, a lot of it is still very new. And so
Exactly.
we're all trying to navigate it and figure it out.
100%. I agree with you. And I don't even think we've hit like I think maybe like 5 years from now, there's going to be a lot of people getting notices to take songs out of their podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, the more, well, actually, though, there's an interesting thing that is happening that I've been reading about is that some of these artists that are on TikTok are okay with it because of the fact that they're suddenly getting downloads for songs that no one
Yeah.
cared about for a while.
100%, absolutely. And I think that, yeah, I sometimes wonder, I wish there was a more seamless way that smaller artists that are new, that do want their songs featured, could easily say, hey, I would love if you used my song in your podcast. And so the only way I know to do that now is to use some of like the audio platforms that have royalty-free music. But even that process is a bit cumbersome.
Yeah, and I've actually heard of some podcasters that will actually reach out to local musicians that they know, and they'll be like, "Hey, can you write me a song?" Like for example, with my
Wow.
own podcast, I commissioned a song. Like
Wow.
I didn't want to risk, using anything that would get me a copyright strike. And so I actually found a music producer and had him create a brand new composition just for me.
How do you do that? What do you say? Do you like, you tell them what you want it to like sound like,
Well,
or?
I sent him several clips of what I liked, and I basically was just like, can you give me something that sounds good, but that kind of has this vibe. And
Yeah.
he sent me a couple different clips, and I said yes or no. And then whenever we created the RSS.com podcast, I kind of went through the same thing. I had to go with a different music producer because that guy was no longer taking on clients. But yeah, we did the same thing. I told him, different things that I was looking for and what kind of compositions I liked. And
Wow.
because I listened to a lot of podcasts, go figure. And so I sent him like kind of the intro songs to some of my favorites, as well as like, little musical clips that I thought were interesting. And we kind of just played with it till we found what we liked.
That's so cool. I love that. I do know that like large podcasts do that. Like I know How I Built This, they commission music every single episode or something. But I love that. That's so cool, and I can't wait until I can do that for my
Well,
podcast.
what's interesting is it's not nearly as expensive as some people think. I mean,
Yeah.
like I thought it was going to be like multiple thousands of dollars, but there are some musicians that are trying to get their name out there, and so they'll do it, anywhere from 50 to $100 for a new
Wow.
song. So
That's amazing. That's
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I started looking on like Fiverr and Upwork and things like
Yeah.
that because I knew that there's going to be a lot more people on there. But then you, of course, have the issue of some people will steal other people's
Right.
music, and so you got to be careful and read all their reviews.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing. I love that idea.
yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I think that podcasting is going to blow up even more in
Yeah.
2023. I think we're going to see a lot more coming from this medium, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. What does that look like to you? What, like, if let's just say podcasting got bigger in 2023, what would
Well,
that look like
for
to you?
one thing, I think that we're going to see a lot more podcast networks. I think we're going to
Hmm.
see a lot more of the smaller creators banding together to create their own networks together,
Yeah.
because there's something to be said for the community of it all. But if you're trying to compete with your Michelle Obama podcast or your Joe Rogans of the world, you have to have something that makes you stand out. And so
Yep.
I think we're going to see a lot more podcast networks coming together of smaller creators that look bigger because they have power in numbers.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a lot more community building. I think that's
Yep.
going to be like, I mean, we just interviewed Tom McNeil with Patreon, and we were talking about community and the importance of not just making it just a show. It's not
Yep.
enough to just be a talking head talking to people. We want
Yep.
to talk with people and build that togetherness,
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
kumbaya of it all.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. And that's something that's like big priority for me, probably like number one priority. This idea that I think I'm becoming more comfortable with having, not having 1,000 fans and having 100 that I know are in my Patreon. They love what I do. We talk. I know their names. Just this idea of community. It's so important.
Well, and I think we all, especially after, the 2020 pandemic, we are all craving connection.
Yeah.
And we want to know that there are other people that are like-minded, that think
Yep.
like we do. And I think that that's the beauty of podcasting, is that, you could be the guy who likes to talk about micro machines and how to paint them, a different color. And you could find people that also want to paint micro machines.
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, any niche you could think of, there's an audience out there for it. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot more like micro niche podcasts,
Yeah.
and we'll see some weird and I'm here for it. I'm excited for it because I think that, you know, the more that people are like, hey, I have a message too, and the more accessible podcasting is going to keep becoming, I think we're going to see some pretty interesting things this year.
I 100% agree, and I'm
so
excited for it.
Yes.
Same here.
Yes. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I am on all platforms as at Lloyd, not George. Obviously, it's my first name being Lloyd, last name George. People always call me George, so I figured I'd make it clear. So you can find me at Lloyd, not George. That's on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
That's fantastic. Well, I got to ask you one last question before I let you go, and it's the one I ask everyone before I let them off the show, and that is, what is one question I didn't ask you that you really wish I had?
Yeah, I think one question you did not ask me is, if I could start any podcast, what would it be? And it would probably be a podcast encouraging people to relax more and drink more water. And I just think that, you know, that to me seems like the recipe to life. And so I just hope more people start to do that.
That's awesome. In fact, we actually have a podcast on rss.com called Drink More Water.
Love it. I have to check it out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I like the health and wellness stuff too. So relax. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Relax, drink more water.
Relax, drink more water, and do a TikTok.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you so much for having me, by the way.
Yes, I was just going to say, thank you so much for being here, because everything that you shared was like so good and also a little scary. And the reason I say that is because, you know, for the introverted people, or the people that are kind of afraid to be on camera, because like even now, like I still get the heebie-jeebies every time I'm about to go on camera, and nobody believes that because I get like this personality once I come on camera.
Yeah.
But I just it's a little scary to think of putting yourself out there and being real. But I like it. I think it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, and that's like, you know, the weird thing, because with like your podcast, you can kind of record it, put it out, and look at it again next week.
Yeah.
With TikTok, there's this like obsession to have to look at it every single hour, see how it's doing. What are other people saying? Did anyone comment? And it could be exhausting. So I totally resonate with that.
Yeah. So it's like, just put your phone down and let the chips fall where they may.
Exactly. Literally.
Well, thank you again for being here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, my fellow podcasters, we hope you enjoyed the insights, tips, and ideas shared in this episode. To learn more about launching and growing your own show, head over to rss.com/blog. And if you're ready to launch a podcast of your own, you can get started for free with your first episode on us. Thanks for tuning in.